Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you taking time to join us today. We are going to allow folks to continue to join as we see that folks are signing in right now. So this webinar will begin shortly. For all those that are continuing to join, we appreciate you spending your time with us this morning, this afternoon, where you're located. Maybe we'll give another moment, another minute or two to allow some more folks to join, and the webinar will begin shortly. All right, everyone. Well, we appreciate, again, you joining us today. My name is Donovan Wiseman from Profisee. We are very excited and looking forward to the message today from Ms. Donna Burbank from Global Data Strategy as we talk about the piece of master data management and in your overall data strategy and how it is a key pillar of your overall data strategy. We still have some folks joining here. And team, if we are ready, we can jump into an introduction of Donna and we can jump into the content.
I think that's a good idea, Donovan.
All right. So if we are able, can we go to the next slide and use that as an introduction?
Are we having technical difficulties? Donna, are you there?
I am. I had been disconnected, but I am now back.
Okay. I think we're ready to get started. So if you want to switch to the next slide, and then we'll let Donovan take over.
All right. Well, as mentioned, we're very excited to have Donna joining us today and speaking to you again, master data management's role in your overall data strategy and an organization's overall data strategy. Very excited to hear Donna's perspective on this, as she really is a thought leader in this space with an extensive background in master data management. She's been awarded some accolades for her work and her research and what she's published as well. As you can see, got a few published works. She's also part of some organizations and a leader with some organizations regionally in the Rocky Mountains around data management and business intelligence work. But you know, her work has really been all across the globe, just about in every continent, and she very often is part of large industry conferences and other platforms that speak to this same similar topic, where she's often presented as a thought leader. So we're very excited to jump in today and learn a little bit more. For a disclaimer, folks, we are recording this session and we will send that out to you. And feel free in the chat and in the question section to pose your questions and comments, and we will jump to those at the end. But for now, Donna, I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Donovan. So as Donovan mentioned, I am sorry, this is going to be a day of technical difficulties. So as Donovan mentioned, today we're talking about master data management and how that relates to data strategy specifically. And I'm sure a lot of you joined because both of those topics are very hot today in the industry. Data strategy, as more companies are becoming data-driven, are top of mind for a lot of companies. But just that word strategy just can seem very overwhelming and very big, right? It just sounds like a big word. So what we'll try to do, and what we do in our practice at Global Data Strategy, and Profisee does a lot of that as well, of really making this idea of simplicity. So how do you break down a data strategy into manageable chunks, and how do you integrate MDM in just a really actionable way? So that's really what we'll be trying to do today in this webinar, and hopefully provide you some real world case studies where this has worked successfully. So again, unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about the data-driven business. Maybe you're here because your company or your CEO has really wanted to become more data-driven. So what does that mean? And we've all heard Harvard Business Review, the famous statement that the data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century. I think there was a typo there, and I think it was supposed to be a master data management architect, but you get the idea. Data is hot. And if you look, that all of these are business journals: Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal. These are all talking about data. So how do we align some very technical topics like data with really the business drivers of the organization? And more, when you're working in data, and why I find, you can probably tell I get excited about things from my tone of voice. One of the reasons I've been in data for over 25, almost 30 years now, and why I'm still in the business, is because of this slide, really. I'm an entrepreneur. I had a business degree before, economics degree before I joined data. And the fact that now these two topics are so closely aligned, that not only does your business strategy inform what you're trying to do with your data, but more and more, as we'll talk about, having good data can really inform your business strategy. Think of some of the leading, topics. The companies in the market are data-driven. Amazon, Uber, it's all about data. So that's kind of the excitement, but then how do we make that happen? And that's hopefully what we'll talk about in the webinar today. So I'm a data person, I'm a data architect, we love definitions. So I thought it'd be worth starting with, what do we even mean by a data strategy? And as Donovan mentioned, I do a lot of speaking and training and classes around the globe on data strategy, and that's often the very first question. Like, what is a data strategy? Is that any different from data management? And we've been doing data management for a long time, but I keep hearing about strategy. What's different? So I would almost go back to, or I would go back just to the pure dictionary definition of strategy versus management, right? When you think strategic, you're thinking big picture. You're thinking of, evolutionary success. And part of it is the personality of the people who are doing strategy versus management. I'll be a bit honest there, right? When you think of an entrepreneur or a CEO, they're thinking of, how do I change the industry? How do I be evolutionary? If you look at that last one, it's the science and art of meeting the enemy under advantageous conditions. They're thinking big, they're thinking broad. They want to change their company through data. Many of us, and I kind of put myself in both of these categories depending on what I'm working on, many of us in management are almost the polar opposite. You're managing things very carefully. Whoa, slow down. We want to get this right. We want to organize things properly. And both are valuable. If you go too far into the big picture without planning your data, you're going to have problems down the road. But for many of us on the call who might be more in that judicious, like, whoa, slow down, we might want to put our strategy hat on and think, wow, I'm doing all of this data management. I've just spent 6 months cleaning up our customer list through master data. But now what do I do with that? How can I go to management and show them opportunity? And maybe that's some of the difference, whereas strategy often thinks of opportunity, sometimes management thinks about risk. And yes, they both think of both, but it's almost a continuum. So that's how I see sort of the difference, and how Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, sort of looks at it as well. So again, the data-driven business you could be, a little cynical and say we've always been doing a data-driven business since, in the pyramids they had, they found records of commerce that were data-driven. So yes, but I hope since then we've gotten a little better and a little more automated. So this came from a survey I had done with an organization called Diversity last year, and you can download that from our website if you're interested in all of the research. But some of the findings I found were interesting to this conversation. That 70% of the respondents felt that their organization, not themselves, saw data as a strategic asset. What does that mean? We can discuss that, but I thought that was very positive. That, again, these were, if you download the survey, you can see from manufacturing, from finance, from retail, from nonprofit, from healthcare, 70% said, yes, data is our strategic asset, or a strategic asset of the organization. And why? You'll see that, again, almost 70% were looking to save cost and increase efficiency. Well, you can say we've been doing that for decades through data. That's really why we do data management, be more efficient. But also, I think what's more heartening, we're doing that better and more efficiently, but that 53% that are really trying to be more transformative, and specifically digital transformation. And that's another word where we could have a whole webinar on what does digital transformation mean. But really, when you're thinking of doing more online, especially in today's strange times, more and more companies are going digital. And I'll actually give you a great case study of where we were able to use MDM to be more digital in this market. So that I find really heartening, because a lot of people see digital transformation as more of a business initiative, and you cannot do digital transformation without a data foundation. And that's where we're seeing, and again, in our practice at Global Data Strategy, a lot of new interest in some of the classic things like data management, like master data management, like data quality, because of new and emerging things like digital and digital transformation. So I think that's a nice, again, back to that picture where data strategy and business strategy are combined. This is a great example of that. Again, to quote some other folks, this isn't just me. This isn't just folks like Profisee or Dataversity or Data Management Association saying this. If you look at the World Economic Forum and some of their studies, I thought this was an interesting article and thought I'd call that out. That they're seeing that now, more than ever, it's not necessarily goods and services that are driving the economy, but data. And they said for one of the first times in history that data is more valuable than the physical objects that companies are selling. So if you look in 2013, which, gosh, seems decades ago, that's only 5 years ago. But the leading markets in terms of market cap in the globe were companies that sold things, Walmart and Exxon and PetroChina, et cetera. And you can say in 2018, some of these companies are obviously still selling things. Amazon clearly sells things, but how do they do that? Through really great data management, right? Just even the recommendation engine, bought this, you may want this. So we kind of are used to seeing that front end data management, but also just their supply chain, the way they're able to manage data, get your package there the next day. That's data driven. So clearly Alphabet, Google is clearly data. Microsoft is data. Apple more and more is data, right? So I thought that was an interesting finding, that yes, even if you're quote brick and mortar, you're not. It's the data that's valuable, and I think we're seeing that more and more. So that's, again, as I mentioned, a great time if you are that data management professional with a business bent or you're sort of an interest in driving business insights, great time for you to have a seat at the table. Again, we do this for a living at Global Data Strategy, and I feel lucky and honored and have a lot of fun working with some of the C-level executives around the globe, helping them drive their business through data. And I will tell you, having talked to a lot of those folks, they're hungry for people who can translate this stuff for them. Sort of, maybe you have an older parent that tries to explain it. Could you help me use my iPhone, right? It's new to them. And so a lot of business-centric executives, C-level executives, know they need data, know that they need to manage it better. But, to be fair, that's not their day job. They're looking for someone that can help them get there. And often, data professionals either are too technical. Some of us can even be a bit snobbish that we know the stuff and other folks don't. But if you're not that way and you're able to be very clear and show how data can be managed and how the benefit can extend across the organization, this is a great career move for you as well. So to give that some thought as we go through this presentation. So we've been talking a lot about business and business optimization. And again, data has been doing this for a long time. That's why we do data management. But I think it has changed in the industry, and I'd like to give a little maybe subtlety on how I see different ways of looking at digital transformation or data transformation. One is, I would say, business optimization. When people say they want to be a data-driven company, how do we do that? Well, we have better analytics to help improve efficiency. If you remember from that survey, that's a big part of data management. How can we do better, reduce manual effort, and also improve revenue as well? How can we have a better marketing campaign because we have a better view of our customer? How can we do better product development? One of the case studies we'll show you, we'll talk about, they actually used data to drive their product development. They were actually able to get some sensor data and feed that back to understand their product, their customer. So I would say that business optimization is how do we do what we do, but do it better by having better data. What's also changing in the market, I would say this idea of business transformation, not just digital transformation, but becoming a data company. Maybe have a completely new model of data monetization where data itself is the product. So yes, that's digital. Maybe you're moving online, but that's back to that World Economic Forum example of the data is the business. So I'll give an example from one of our customers that isn't in these case studies, but it was a big manufacturing company. It was in Latin America, and they did a lot of shipping between point to point, and they got a lot of good data on transit times for big trucks and rural roads in Latin America that most people do. So it was almost the Uber of big trucking, and some of the, could the truck bear that weight across this bridge? And they were able to monetize an app for other shipping agencies that were non-competitive to use that data. Again, that wasn't their core business, but through their core business, they had some great data that they could monetize in a new way. So I'm sure a lot of you on this call have management that are asking you that question. How can we use data, the data we have, for a new purpose? And you can't do that without great data management. So that was a lot of kind of visionary type thing, but you might be asking, especially if you're in the data management side, so what do I do? What are the concrete steps I can actually do to make this happen? So this is our framework we use at Global Data Strategy to really sort of demystify a couple things. What is a data strategy? What are the pieces you need? And hopefully it helps you answer what's that overlap between data management and the data strategy. If you're familiar with organizations like DAMA or DAMA, depending on where you live on the globe, and they have a body of knowledge, the DAMA DMBOK. A lot of these buckets you see are kind of in that as well. So we didn't reinvent the wheel. I think we just organized the wheel in a way that's more strategic. So when we go into any company, and you can do this yourself, we always start with, and it should be obvious, but what's your business strategy? What are you trying to do with data? And again, with those gears at the top are trying to say, is what I said earlier, is bidirectional. You might say, what data do you have, and what business could you create from that data? So to me, that's fun stuff, right? What are we trying to do? How can we be strategic? How can we be entrepreneurial with your data? That's the top down. What I also find a lot of fun is the bottom up, is the tech, right? Are we using relational databases? And do we have big data sources? And is it streaming? Is it unstructured? Is it in documents? All of that needs to be managed. And then as you move up the stack, all of this is important to get right. How do we integrate that? How do we have the right metadata or about the data structures, what the data means? And we'll give some examples where that's huge. What do we even mean by a customer? Is it an existing customer? Is it a lapsed customer? Is it a high net worth customer? Gosh, that one topic could take a big effort just to understand that. And then again, as we move up the stack, and you'll see highlighted, obviously for this topic, is master data. How do we get that single golden record of your product, your customer, etc.? But that takes a sort of a village to do that, right? You can't do master data without a great architecture. Master data is enabled and can help with data quality. Once you have master data, that can feed your analytics, on and on, right? So these are all integrated. So master data in and of itself is critical to a data strategy, but it's not in a vacuum. The other big part of that again could be an entire webinar, is data governance. Because, and we'll talk about that as we move along, master data is enabled by people and process. So you can have a great tool, you can be using Profisee to manage that, but how do you get the workflow right? Do we know the right data stewards to be making these data quality decisions? Do we have the right culture where people even use the data that's been mastered, et cetera, et cetera? So I know I spent a bit of a time on that slide, but to me, this is sort of that core framework to how do I look at my business strategy, and then how can master data enable that? So again, we love definitions, but I did want to clarify, and this is from Gartner. They've got a great kind of business data dictionary. That master data is really those core entities of the enterprise, your customers, prospects, citizens, et cetera. And then I like how they separated that from master data management, which obviously, yes, it's a technology-enabled discipline, but really it's where business and IT come together. And I think that sums up that previous slide. So yes, there's master data, but you can't get great master data without master data management, if that makes sense. So yes, we can have academic descriptions, but I sort of promise some real world use cases. And I, at least personally, always do better when people give me an example of what you're talking about rather than just talking theoretically. So I thought it might be fun to go through some examples of what is master data and maybe go beyond just the classic customer, which we always talk about. So here's some examples, and some of these were actually Profisee examples, and we'll go through. So one of them is the famous $1 million cheese slice. And I don't know, we all do this, right? We come home from work, honey, what did you work on today? And I always find it funny that, today people had the issue with the cheese. It always seems sort of strange when you step back from it. But these are real world business issues that have monetary and brand reputation consequences. So this was a restaurant chain we worked with, and this chain, part of their issue, their differentiator in the market was they had very innovative menus, and they changed it up all the time. And it was a kind of a fast casual business chain, restaurant chain, and they would have sort of different cheese flavors or different sriracha sauce and all these type of things. So they had tried this campaign where they used some very fancy, I think it was blue cheese, and they could customize that from the customer could say, I want this burger with a different cheese on it. But they hadn't sort of fed that through a proper master data through the supply chain, through their point of sale system. So long story short, someone at the restaurant could add this cheese onto their burger, but they didn't charge any extra. So that was a small problem, but that was cascaded across an entire national food chain and built up over time, that across a year, that small little master data mistake, that they didn't have a consistent product list, a consistent menu that cascaded across the organization, ended up costing them over $1 million just from a master data organization. And we'll talk more about that one. But again, something as simple as pricing of a slice of cheese adds up. Another one we worked on, this is based in the UK, was sort of the $2 million baby bottle, right? Again, they sold baby products, and one of them was a bottle, and they sold that through Amazon, actually. And Amazon, if you're not aware, if you load your product master, which is really when you look at a product on Amazon, that's product master data. There are certain criteria you need to meet to match their format, because they need to standardize. They've got good master data, and they're large enough they can force their vendors to say you need to match ours. Well, this company's internal master data was not in a format that was easy to just transform and upload. Their own master data wasn't great. So they kept getting fines, and those added up to over $2 million over a year from a single product. So again, it seemed, I can see a manager saying, really, we're going to worry and have a whole effort to clean up product codes and the size and color of a baby bottle. Does it really matter if it's green versus lime green? Well, yeah, it kind of does, because A, that's what your customer is buying, and B, it can have really negative consequences if you don't. The next one is probably a different example that I tried to add some that aren't, again, your typical example. So we had done some work, and I can say the name because they're a reference customer, and they've actually done some webinars with us. This is the Environment Agency over in England, and their master data really was the environment. So they have living organisms, they do water samples, they do air samples, they do natural resources like fish and wildlife. And we were trying to do a master data of, can we even just say that organisms are organisms? Is a fish the same as a cow, the same as a biological agent? And it was funny because I used to take these calls early in the morning. There was an argument of we had a living organism, and someone was saying, but the fish is dead. Could it be a dead organism? And I just jumped right in and I said, well, it's a living organism with a status of dead. I started to feel like a Monty Python skit. But again, not your typical example, but they needed to go through the same types of things: data modeling, understanding your taxonomy and your hierarchies of what an organism was. And that was their, quote, business or their organization. Another one on the lower left should be near and dear to your heart, no pun intended. But when you think of the consequences of this, so this wasn't a retail chain, but we worked with a local children's hospital, and they were trying to get the credentials of all of their providers, and that is actually quite complex if you're working with that yourself. So yes, maybe Dr. Smith is credentialed for heart surgery, but actually Smith is a common surname, and there's a lot of Dr. Smiths. And we actually have 7 different hospital chains, and Dr. Smith jumps between the different hospitals, and he credentialed at each location. Again, that was quite complex and was a big master data effort. And I hope you're glad they do that, because if someone's going to operate on my heart, I hope it's the right Dr. Smith that's been credentialed. Kind of a funny story. They actually did a big effort. And again, when we talk about business process, yes, they mastered the data, but then all of the key cards, everything was based, all of the business processes were based off this master data list. The president of the hospital tried to go into the cancer ward, and the secretary wouldn't let him in because he wasn't credentialed, and he got very angry. I think he should have been happy she followed the rules, but he had a bit of an ego, and that was a case where actually their master data was too good. He was used to just going in, and now he wasn't credentialed, so they didn't let him in. So sort of a funny story from master data. The next one, again, maybe is your classic what is a customer and customer master data. But this was an interesting case. It was a large financial institution, and they were an insurance company, and they managed the estates of folks like us, that have 7 houses across the globe. One's in Paris and one's in New York, and they've got 7 Mercedes and some, Rembrandt art that they all want to have insurance for. They may also own a company that needs to be insured. They may also have a yacht that needs to be insured. That's typical questions we all face. So they had done a lot of high analytics, really kind of next generation predictive analytics, and they were able to do some web scraping to find out maybe where did one of these people have a bankruptcy in the past, or were they on the board of an organization they hadn't disclosed. So they were able to do some really interesting analytics, but when it came back to joining it with their own data in-house, they couldn't tell. They couldn't tell, is Michael Jones this high net worth customer who might own a big bank, or is Michael Jones someone that just has car insurance with us, and he actually went bankrupt last year. They were able to do great analytics and find out some really innovative things around high net worth customers, but they weren't able to join it with their own master data. So that caused a whole new master data issue. The one on the lower right comes up all of the time. Do we even know where our locations of our stores are? Do we know what regions? I was on a call just this morning where we were trying to discuss what's a region versus a market versus a location. With the Environment Agency, it was about a catchment. How do we define these different organizations? What are our sites? Gosh, the number of times this happens, and it might even be, well, there's the Mary spreadsheet that has that, right? A lot of this core master data of an organization is often stored in something very simple like a spreadsheet. So please don't do that. So hopefully those were some different examples of master data and the impact before we start to go into the details. So a class example is customer and getting that 360 view of customer, right? So this might be an example. I am a sporting goods company. I want to sell as many sporting goods as possible. Well, here's one of my customers, Stefan Kraus. He's 31 years old. He lives in St. Moritz, Ponterzina, Switzerland, which is near St. Moritz, and he's a ski instructor. You think he's our perfect customer, right? And we know a lot about him. He does all of his purchases on the iPhone. He's been in our loyalty program. But when you look at his purchases, he really only spent 500 euro back in 2015. That's actually not a lot for sporting goods. Probably because he's a ski instructor, he gets a lot of gear free. So maybe he'd make a good spokesperson. He's an athletic guy, and he'd be good for our, magazine. But probably not our biggest purchaser customer. See, if we look at our data, there's another Stefan Kraus, and he's 62, and he's a banker in Zurich. And you wouldn't think he likes football, European football, and he's a banker, and he's more old-fashioned. He doesn't use his phone at all. He wants a physical letter. But when you look at how much he spends, 3,500 euro, a lot more than the other Stefan, because when he goes on holiday, he wants to have the best gear possible. He goes hiking once a year, he goes skiing once a year, and he buys everything, right? So ironically, he's your better customer. But you wouldn't have been able to see that without understanding, A, is this the same Stefan Kraus? Did I get him wrong? And I sent a text message to this guy and he never got it because he doesn't read text message. Did I market to the wrong person? How can I understand my customer? So is one father and one son. Maybe he's buying all this gear to give to his son, and that's why his son doesn't buy anything. We won't know that if we can't even differentiate or who's the Stefan Kraus and link that to their data. So to get that right is not any of these individually, it's all of them together. So do I understand the customer journey? Do I understand that Stefan buys through text message and not through a physical store, right? Do I understand the supply chain, how to get the gear to Stefan? Do I understand how he's using those products and how I can improve it? So the business process, the workflow, the customer journey is really key to that. Then how do I integrate the data in the green box, right? Do I understand how I even got the customer? Is the quality of that data? Do I integrate social media? Maybe Stefan texts a lot about the products, and that's great, or posts them on Twitter. Do I understand what he's bought? Do I understand the credit history? I probably Stefan number 2 is a great credit history. Maybe Stefan number 1 doesn't. Data quality. I mean, the very banal, boring, which Stefan Kraus is it, and where does he live? Business rules about the products. Can I ship to him at certain product weights and how much that costs? And then data governance is huge. Who is the responsible owner of the data? Is it the person at the shop that maybe typed his information in? Is it something through the loyalty program? Stefan updates his own data. How do I get the right security and privacy and procedures? That all of these are critically important to get that right balance right. And what can be frustrating about master data is you really need to get all those right to make it sing. But the upside is once you do get that sing, the value is tremendous. So a bit of an academic thing because this comes up a lot, and we're talking about data and we're talking about transaction data and master data are very different, but they're related. So a typical example, if we go back to the store, full disclosure, I'm a skier. A lot of my examples have ski gear in them, but this is an outdoor store. And Stefan Kraus bought some telemark ski boots and some watches and things, and so did Donna Burbank. But those actions, the fact that Stefan bought something on a certain date, that's your transaction. And the master data are more those nouns, the customer, the product, etc. So let's just go one example. So your transaction data is going to be the fact that Stefan bought a ski boot in St. Moritz, Switzerland at a certain date, and that Donna bought one in Boulder, Colorado. But if you want to get a little more detailed around that, your master data is going to be the customer, the fact that Donna Burbank is a customer, Stefan Kraus is a customer, Wendy Hu is a customer. And then you have the product and the product list and the product code and the product pricing across the globe, as well as the product location. It's always complicated. So even if something as simple as CH versus CO, CO is a state, CH is a country code, right? Can we get those standardized? That's some of your reference data. Or the master data of St. Moritz. Did he buy it in St. Moritz? Did he live in St. Moritz? Did it get shipped from St. Moritz? That's where some of your metadata comes in. What does that even mean? So again, you really need to know all of that. I was in St. Moritz and I bought a ski watch. Does that mean I was traveling or I lived there? Right? A huge, big difference to understand. So to get that right, again, there's a lot of pieces. So generally, there's some sort of golden record MDM hub in the center, something like a Profisee that can help you get that golden record, create those reference data sets, and then you can use that data through a publish and subscribe model to integrate with your CRM system and your sales system. And part of the complexity is there's a lot of different systems that store this information. And then can I get that right data quality and matching rules and the data stewardship workflow for that? And then can I publish that out into something like a data warehouse or my analytics hub to really get those reports? So again, MDM, to be clear, just does that, because that's a big effort. It does that matching. So you know which Stefan Kraus is Stefan Kraus. But once you do that, you can have a lookup in your system when Stefan comes into the store. Hi, Stefan, you still living in St. Moritz? How's the skiing this year? Right? And you can get that customer experience, but you can't do that without that core golden record. So a couple examples, again, to keep it real, and all of these examples did use Profisee, just full disclosure, these are all Profisee customers. So this first one, and again, we always like to use pictures in our examples. This is the golden record. This is literally from a similar slide that the customer used to help understand the value of this. So this was a managed service medical organization where they dealt with, individuals that were sort of lower income and had a lot of issues from not only health, but community services. They may have been homeless. They may have had drug addiction problems. So part of this issue was, yes, they needed to understand that, Mike Jones there in the center was their member, but he had a lot of touch points. He may have had a healthcare incident. He may have been at a community living station. He may have had an incident with the police. He may have had some counseling from the staff. And the issue was, yes, do I know it's Mike Jones and his name is spelled correctly, but can we join up the master data across these different organizations to know that maybe he called and had a psychotic episode yesterday, and then he went in and had his arm broken the next day. Those are probably related. They were at different agencies, but they were related. So this, yes, it was a data challenge, but it was more a business process challenge and a governance challenge. That how do you get the data, even the MPI number of the provider, consistent across all of those pieces? So kind of to show the value across, we showed that across all of those people. We showed the providers this picture and the medical locations and the staff this picture to kind of explain to them, yes, when you're putting in something like his name or his Medicaid ID, it's critical you get that right so that we can help him when he's having an episode and we know who else he's talked to. So this was kind of a, heartstrings example that there's actual people behind this, and it's often important to remember that. So which again ties into the fact that successful MDM or successful data strategy is part of that, is a combination of architecture, business process, governance, and stewardship to really get to that true business strategy. And we say business strategy, but this was a human services organization. Their business was helping people. And you really needed to understand that whole view of that, the whole business scenario, to really get to this. And it was the combination of all of it. How do we get the data process-wise from one to the other, as well as how we do the match rules and things like that. So this quote, again, is from Gartner, and just sort of a point of interest, this is a few years old. I think Bill O'Kane is now at Profisee. So I've been using this slide for a while, but kind of fit here particularly. And this, I thought, was an interesting quote from Gartner. The top reasons for failure, we often see a lot of success with master data, but some of the reasons that generally fails is failure to align business process and failure or delaying the governance. And I would say that aligns with our practice. It's often not the tool or the data or even your data architect, it's the people. People are complicated, and this really speaks to, is this aligned with your overall strategy? Does everyone in the organization understand it and how it fits into the business process and governance and vision? One more example, I always find it helpful to talk to examples. These aren't your typical, I kind of picked these on purpose, aren't your typical selling a product to a customer. This was a nonprofit. It was a Head Start organization, and they do social services, they do education, they do family services. They came to us initially with a data governance initiative, and they had a question saying, I want to even understand how many children and families do we serve? Because again, similar product, they're touching these families across mental health services, education services, family support services, and they couldn't get that single view. They'd never heard of the word master data. But we got there through governance, we got there through data quality, and we got there through data warehousing. So they've been on a several-year journey with us, and they've now implemented their MDM, or in the process of. And one of the nice success stories I thought it would be worth sharing. A couple things: they're able to get that holistic view of their families, cost-wise. Even the first year, they were able to save over $100,000 through the better data management. And they are able to now understand how many families they serve. But just a nice little anecdote, obviously this is a high human touch environment, and suddenly with the COVID epidemic, they had to do everything online. So imagine you're working with families that are requiring mental health services, even more needed now, working with children that might be getting homeschooling. They were able to move to a telehealth model within a couple weeks, and they're still up and running. And I thought that was a great example of social services isn't where you typically think cutting edge technology. They're not like a financial company that's been doing this for years. They were able to implement, and these are just to put, not to disparage people's skills, but these were, early childhood education teachers and counselors. They're not typically your tech folks, and they would be the first to say that. But they were able to get the tech, implement the tech, and then in the middle of a pandemic, kind of turn a complete 360 and go telehealth, because they had great mastery. I just think that's an awesome story, and what a time where people really need this support. So anyway, kind of a feel-good story, but also another way where they were able to change. This literally is digital transformation. We use that term a lot, but it was digital transformation through master data with Profisee, with an example that maybe we wouldn't think of. We often think of products and customers. A big part of that, we did this at that organization, we'll do it with the Nest example, is understanding the business process. I'm an architect. I love mapping things out. And often you can do these very simply, whether it's a business, this is a good old-fashioned business process model, BPMN. You can use a customer journey map. But understand, especially when you're looking strategically at your data strategy, how are we going to serve our customer? How are we going to manage our this was a product development lifecycle with supply chain through marketing. How are we going to use it, and where are the touch points with data? And that's going to tie into your MDM. You really can't get MDM right if you don't understand where the touch points with data are. And so often if we do see a problem with MDM, we forgot one of the pieces in the supply chain, the data supply chain, that is using or updating or create your old-fashioned, if people are familiar with CRUD matrices, where is your data created, read, updated, and deleted. You don't want to forget that. That's key to getting it right. So often do that. At this Nest example, we did a lot of this business process. This was that $1 million cheese slice folks. And they were a restaurant chain, but they had, literally in a way, it's a lot like manufacturing or even your Amazon. There's a full supply chain, where we went and we spoke to everyone across that supply chain, from the chefs in the kitchen. They had a test kitchen. Actually, it was here in Denver, where I'm based, to the people in marketing that were trying to get the menu together, to the folks in the supply chain that were costing out how much the cheese or the eggs or the milk or whatever was used in their development was costing. And then from the point of sale, we actually went to all of these, and we actually went to the restaurant and saw how from the point of sale system, did someone order that product, and then how did it flow through the supply chain? So we had a whole lot of business process models. And again, this was the Profisee tool. We were able to use some of the workflow to do that and to implement that, but a lot of it was process. Interestingly, they did a lot of governance, but they did that through basically their product launch. And anybody, I thought this was a really neat example, if they were going to launch a menu, and maybe they were going to launch at Christmas time, and they were going to launch this new red and green milkshake or whatever they had, right? Everyone got together from all of these pieces, from product development to supply chain to menu. And again, this is business strategy and data strategy, but what they missed was the data part. So anyone could stand up and say, and I sat in on one of these, and it was interesting. Someone said, we want to launch, I think it was something like a drink, a milkshake or something. And the person said, we can't launch that because it will take the person making it too long to walk across the kitchen. One of those ingredients is in the freezer, and we can't get it to the table fast enough. I never would have thought of that. Someone else might chime in and say we can't have red and green because that'll clash with our logo. I mean, who would have thought, right? But data was never in those meetings. So we got data in those meetings, and we were able to explain master data to these folks. They hadn't used that word before. The CEO said, I knew I had a problem, but I didn't know it was called master data. So now if there was a problem with the data person could get up and say, hey, we can't launch that product without a product code and without a data steward. And that really worked well. That I thought it was a great example of linking business launch with data and data launch. And they wouldn't have gotten it being master data and the process around it, had we not literally tied it with their process. And you'll see, I'm a visual person. I use a lot of pictures. We use these pictures with the customer. They get it. They got when you're trying to make a menu with eggs and you're trying to get it through the supply chain, it's not going to show up right in your point of sale. That's master data. We had data models. We had process models. We didn't show that to the business. Again, when you're thinking of aligning business and data strategy, you need to kind of think of that full holistic view. So I thought this was kind of a great story too of, yes, it's manufacturing, yes, it's retail, but menus are a little different. And maybe you don't think of cheese and eggs as master data, but it is. A quote from their, one more on this one, from their marketing department. I think they said, yeah, our menu printer has a better sense of our master data than we do. And it was actually true because they had a history of all the menus and what was on it. They didn't have that internally. So we were able to fix a lot of problems with the master data itself. So in summary, I hope we sort of showed today that, MDM is on the rise, and the reason is because everyone's trying to be digital and data-driven and be more data-centric, and you can't do that without great master data. Master data has been around for decades. I've been doing it for decades. It is harder than ever because more people are understanding that if I want to get my business right, I need to get my data right, and if I want to get my data right, I have to master it. To do that right, you need all of those things that are listed. Understand your business goals, pick the right problem to solve, get your data architecture as well as your governance and process, and that can have a great success in the business. So I do want to open it up to questions, and Donna will be taking those if you want to type them in the Q&A section. Quick little sales pitch, if you need help with any of this, we do it for a living, and this is what we do all the time, and we'd be happy to help. And then Donovan, I'll pass it back to you if you want to kind of open it up to Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Donna. That was a lot of great information. We have a couple of questions here that were sent directly to us, but again, to the audience, please feel free right now to enter your questions using the control panel in the questions section. A couple of questions that were sent to us, Donna, the first one being, in your experience working with many of the Fortune 500 and organizations of different sizes, what is most common? Do the business users own master data management, or is it the technical users?
That is a great question. So, I mean, I don't want to say that it depends, but it's both, right? It's definitely both. I think to make it sing, however, you need to have it business driven in terms of the champion coming from the business. If the business doesn't understand this and see the value of it, it's not going to work. That said, you need a strong technical foundation. So ideally, both will work hand in hand, and the tech will become more and more important. But the business needs to champion it, because the thing with master data, it will need change. It's going to need business process change. It'll need data governance. And that's where, as they say, the rubber meets the road, and there'll be some hard decisions. So you need from the top, that last example had the CEO sponsoring it, to know that everybody, we're doing this differently. And also the business data stewardship. So master data is owned by the business. That said, you need great tech, because that's the hard stuff to make it sing in the back end. So led by I often like to say business-led, IT supported, is a nice way to look at that.
Fantastic. Another question we've received is there a compliance, and in parentheses it states GDPR, CCPA, or other regulation you have gone through? So it seems that's a question related to the application of MDM to those compliance standards.
Yes, absolutely. And I probably should have mentioned that even more of that. If folks aren't familiar, those are both privacy regulations, GDPR, data protection regulation in Europe, but it doesn't only apply to Europe. If you're in the US and have European companies, you need to look at that as well. and then the California privacy protection. Great example that if you need to understand what fields from a customer you need to store. One of my customers had a great quote that I'll steal from him. He said, data in a way is like toxic waste. You would only want to manage it very carefully, and it can be very dangerous if you manage it incorrectly. So we say we want everything around a customer, but if it comes down to their credit card information or their private health, you also have to be very, very careful of that. So it can define, what do we want to store? Maybe we only store the minimum subset we absolutely need to avoid. If we don't need their credit score, don't store that as master data. Just store the minimum. But also, for those I am a healthcare organization, I do need some of their core personal information. If you don't know where it is, it's really hard to comply with CCPA or GDPR or any of those HIPAA. So a lot of folks are moving towards MDM because it's a single view of customer. They understand it. Whether it's stored in one place and or you have the lineage of that in several places, that's a great example of why you would need MDM to really adhere to those regulations.
Awesome. A couple other questions that were sent to us directly. They seem sort of relative as well. One of them is there a common business initiative behind an MDM project in your experience?
There are some common ones, but I'm seeing some of those fun examples I gave in the beginning. I'm always surprised. I was of the diversity of use cases. I was on one earlier this morning on, it was a market research company, and they were defining what a flavor was. And imagine they've had work groups, and their master data is flavors, which is kind of interesting, right? So that said, marketing is often a great supporter of this, trying to get a single view of your customer, a single view of your product usage. Compliance is another one that was brought up. It was kind of good example of the carrot and stick. Supply chain is another great one. If I can't get a single view of my product across a supply chain, it's really hard to do business. So we could go on, but those are kind of some of the big ones. And customer obviously is a big driver, or patient, and credentialing for physicians, that sort of thing as well.
Very good. And the last question I see directly to us, and I'll encourage the audience again as well, if you have some questions, we still have a little bit of time, so feel free to enter those. The last one I have here that was sent directly to us, Donna, is this person says, I can see how my team could use MDM. How would you suggest I start this conversation to get my company started?
Great question. And there's another one that came in. I'm having trouble reading it, but anyway, so I would say starting with the business strategy, the why, is great, because there's always competing priorities. Even if we know it's absolutely critical to understand a single view of your customer, you'd think that's obvious, but getting more nuance, trying to get an ROI early. And I know Profisee's got some best practices we do as well of trying to quantify that, because you will always, even though it seems so, clearly obvious why you need to understand your customer, there'll always be something competing. So show why it can help revenue. Can you tie that to a marketing campaign? Can you tie it to save costs? Always a great way to start. And then I think tying that with data governance, because people are going to have to own this down the road. Who are going to be your data owners, your data stewards, and that aligns with process. Even before you start looking at tech and tools, if you can get those things right early, who's going to be your champions, who's going to work with you on this and why it matters, absolutely start there. And then the tech will come and is super critical. But if you start with tech, it's going to be harder to switch and then sell it back, if that makes sense.
That's fantastic advice. And yes, I see that question that came in. Looks like it might be in two parts here. And the question is, have you gone through print publication of catalogs, InDesign, using to holiday brochures or quarterly catalogs? So it sounds like digital assets and how MDM may relate to those.
Yes, that's an excellent example. A couple things. That restaurant chain I mentioned, they had something similar in that they sort of had seasonal menus and that sort of thing, and trying to get those right. So they not only mastered the things on the menu, but then they mastered they kind of grouped that under campaigns. So they would have, here's our holiday brochure, holiday menu, and they were sort of able to manage the timing. And that's, again, where having that holistic look helped, because they were able to get with marketing. There's a lot of touch points for that. Another example, unfortunately, this is a negative one. It was for a membership organization over in the UK, and they were trying to clean up. They had both customer information and the organizations people worked for, and they had their master data wrong. And some poor woman up in northern England, I don't think I'm exaggerating, she got 20,000 magazines, physical magazines, delivered to her home. All of us are a bit flabbergasted. Name protected for the innocent. But that's if any data architects on the call can kind of see what join might have gone wrong, sort of an outer join between company and organization and individual. But anyway, she had 20,000 instead of one. That's an example of trying to get a single view of customer. That's also a great example of integrating with business process. And governance? Who was the steward that might have checked that query before it went out? Who looked at the business process before some gentleman loaded up a truck with 20,000 magazines? You think someone might have noticed that along the road. That was kind of a negative example. But again, it tied to their campaigns and catalogs and customer, right? So master data is all sort of integrated. But yeah, that's a great example, that kind of timing that with campaigns and everything else. A good master data example.
Very good. Well, Donna, those are all the questions that I currently see in the queue.
Great. Well, thanks so much.
Fantastic. Well, everyone in the audience, again, we appreciate you joining us today. Donna, thank you again for putting this all together for us. Again, this session has been recorded. We're sending out a recording for you to refer back to, speaking to everyone in the audience, and feel free to contact Donna directly and contact Profisee for any follow-up questions or conversations you'd be interested in having.
Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Donovan.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.